the production of IMO can be from as small as 50 pounds up to hundreds and hundreds of pounds, tons of the material. And it's all, I've seen pictures in Korea of them making 50-foot long piles of this stuff. And I've also just made it in my backyard enough for the whole year. So it's very versatile in that way, which is nice. The IMO 1 through 4 is a 4-step process. So you make the IMO 1 in the basket, the rice. That leads you to making IMO 2, which is basically your stock, your inoculant stock. Then you use IMO 2 to create IMO 3 on the wheat bran. And then you use IMO 3 to create IMO 4 mixed with soil, which is your applicable product. So it's a 4-step process that from start to finish takes 4 weeks, basically. Once you have IMO 2 made, it takes 2 weeks. It's a really fun process, and it begins with some little basket like this and enough cooked rice to fill it about 3/4, 2/3 of the way up. And you cover this basket with any sort of breathable cloth and leave it in a wood mulch, leaf mulch compost pile right out in your backyard. In about 5 or 6 days, you come back and you open it up, and the rice is warm, and it's covered with this thick, hyphae, white, fluffy activity of microorganisms. And that's your initial culture that you created yourself for the cost of cooking a couple cups of rice. Brown rice, white rice, whatever. I use brown rice. So then you scoop it all out, and you put it in a bowl, and you mix it equal parts with brown sugar. And what the brown sugar does is it ferments with the rice and microorganisms and creates basically a stable inoculant. And you utilize that inoculant for up to 2 years. It'll, probably more, but I would imagine after a couple of years, you might as well make a new one. I mean, it doesn't take long. So the rice in here is what the Master Cho calls IMO 1, Indigenous Microorganism 1, that first phase. Number 2, IMO 2, is when you mix it with the brown sugar, and they have this gruel, and that just stores in a glass container or clay container in a cool, dark place. And then to make IMO number 3, you need some sort of fodder or feed for the IMO 2. So you take about a handful of IMO 2, mix it in a bucket of non-chlorinated water, and dump it on whatever feed substrate you're using. I use wheat bran. You can use rice bran. You could probably use oat bran. Anything that's high in protein that the microorganisms can feed on. Just like they fed on the rice here in your basket, they're going to feed on this big pile of wheat bran. So I usually use about 4 50-pound bags of wheat bran, inoculate it with the IMO 2 in the water, mix it up, add some of the other inputs that I was discussing, the fermented fish amino acids. You can add fermented plant juice, which is the one utilizing the weeds and fermenting them in brown sugar. You can use brown rice vinegar, or you could use apple cider vinegar, and different, you could use some sort of seaweed product if you wanted, spirulina. And you're mixing that in, it's like mixing up a big microorganism bread. So you're turning this wheat bran and then let it sit, and it heats up like crazy, and you keep it covered with some straw mats. And when you pull over those straw mats after a couple days, it's got these beautiful white hyphae that are cultured all over it. And then let that cook, and you keep turning it, and it reaches about 140 degrees. And once it's completely fermented all the way through, it cools down a little bit and basically goes dormant because there's no more food there. You're left with these clumps of fermented wheat bran that is called IMO 3. And you take IMO 3 and you mix it with soil, just regular old soil from your garden. You can use a little bit of compost, you could use some animal manure, finished animal manure. And these microorganisms that are alive in the IMO 3 are already alive in the soil. Because remember, the initial culture came from the leaf pile or the compost pile. And so when you mix it with that soil, it just goes crazy. And in 12 hours, less than 24 hours, it heats up to, again, 140 degrees. You don't need to add any more inoculant. It's all there. And you can add some more feed of some sorts, like the FAA or the FPJ or brown rice vinegar. The Master Cho calls for adding some sea water or sea salt diluted, just different things to feed them, help the microorganisms grow and become stronger and more resilient. So that's the basic cornerstone of making the IMO. And the finished product is the soil mixed in with the wheat bran into IMO 4. And it's a beautiful thing to see happen because you're just watching life grow so rapidly. And then you're spreading that out onto your soil. It's a fun process. You can do it with kids. You can get your hands into it, and it's not going to hurt you.